There you are. I've been waiting for you. I've been staring into the darkness, too afraid to enter. But grab your torch and let us venture in together. As we traverse the haunting terrain, the darkness echoes A Great Weakness, written by Tyler Jackson. Philip had always had severe stress and anxiety. He had long bouts of depression and misery. Sorrow and dejection paralyzed him almost constantly. He was fearful and trepid. He was a loser. He was ugly. Nothing he did mattered. He was scrawny and wasn't particularly bright. He had no family. He had no friends. Once, someone had tried to show him the magic of connecting to others. A magic that lets you feel what others felt. Philip studied and trained hard. He thought this magic may help him. He was wrong. Once he had mastered the magic, he tried connecting with people to feel these wonderful feelings he had been told about. Connecting with people just made things worse, though. Instead of feeling what others felt, he instead felt how much better they were than him. He felt how much life they had in them, and it magnified the lifelessness he already felt inside. The most often thing he felt when connecting, though, was others' contempt for him. The one who taught him to use the magic tried to help Philip. They were maybe the closest thing Philip ever had to a friend, but he ruined that too. When they tried to dive deeper, when they tried harder to show Philip the good that was in the world, they were overcome. Philip's emotions flooded them, and they fell spasming on the ground. Philip ran away that day and never returned. He didn't know what happened, but it seemed they were worse off because of him. Philip found an old cabin in the forest filled with books and writings. They were about a man who fled society. He hated them for everything they did to him. They called him disgusting and perverted. They said he went against the natural flow of things. When he referred to himself as a visionary, others would instead mock or jeer and refer to him as short-sighted and half-baked. He wanted to teach them a lesson, wanted them to know of his power. Philip pored over all the man's writings and books. He stayed one winter, then two. He lived mostly off preserves in the cabin with what little food he could catch. Though as he began to develop his own power, he began by experimenting on the animals in the woods. During the third and fourth winters, he hardly had to rely on preserves at all. He could use his new power on the animals and consume their tasty flesh. During the fifth and sixth winters, he was ready to experiment on those in the nearby village. It was much easier than expected, and his victim count tallied even higher. He caught wind of people in the town refer to the unseen assailant as the Phantom. Philip liked that. It held a sense of power with it. At the time of the seventh winter, Philip was ready to punish those of his hometown. Those pretenders. They pretended to help, but really, they were the ones that made him feel like this. They were to blame for everything. Why else would he grow up feeling like this? It wasn't normal. Those frauds hated him from the beginning. They must have gotten some sick pleasure from tormenting him, so, well, not anymore. They would pay for what they did. Maybe after that, the world would pay for how it treated him. Philip pulled his dark cloak around him as he walked towards his hometown. The cloak, a stark contrast against the white of newly fallen snow. Ahead at the entrance stood 2 guards. Philip didn't know them, but it didn't matter. Even if they were new to the town, they would have been corrupted by the others, or would have to be corrupted to live here. Their clothing and armor were nearly free of spots or marks. Philip spit. More people who were so worried about their appearance. As he drew near, within talking distance, one of the guards spoke up and asked what his business was here. Philip said nothing and continued to walk forward. The guard drew his sword and asked the question again. Philip continued walking, but raised his head and locked eyes with the guard. The guard froze, motionless. Tears began to well up in his eyes. He dropped his sword. His knees buckled and he dropped to both hands and knees. Tears now ran freely down his face. The guard screamed and clutched his head. He fell on his side, screaming and writhing in agony. The other guard watched in terror and surprise. The guard's fate would have been much worse. Philip had discovered how to intensify and project his emotions and feelings onto others. He had used what he had been taught as groundwork. Instead of feeling what others felt, he would force them to feel what he felt. Humans were much easier to cripple than animals. Not only could Philip force his emotions onto others, but he could also escalate the terrible emotions everyone else already had. The second guard's emotions would be bubbling at the top. Philip knew that fear bred more fear. Anxiety bred stress and misery. The first guard's demise would only compound the second guard's. With the guard's emotions so near to the top, Philip could escalate them to levels he wouldn't have been able to before. With any luck, others would soon notice and breed panic and fear even more so. The second guard looked at Philip and Philip locked eyes with him. The guard's breathing became quick and labored. He started scratching his arms uncontrollably. Eyes darted back and forth. Between scratches, an article of clothing was torn off. Breaths were now interrupted with strange screams, loud and long. Most of his clothing was now off. Blood ran down his arms. His hands frantically found new places to scratch. New wounds were open. He began rolling around in the snow and mud. A new scream entered the mix. One from the village. It had come from a young woman. She saw one guard convulsing on the ground, head in his hand, tears streaming down his face. The other guard hardly looked like a man anymore. A beast covered in mud and blood and dripping wounds. Breathing staggered and even, overshadowed by horrendous shrieks. Philip let the young woman run away, screaming. The village now starting to reek of terror, fear, stress, and anxiety. Philip strode into the village, locking eyes with the many that he came across. Though all reactions were different, the village had become a broken myriad of screams and panic, meaning that all reactions were extreme. Mothers abandoned their children, fathers attacked sons, priests cried for their god in exasperation, children wailed in the square. Whether Philip had interacted with them or not, people tore themselves apart. They tore others apart. They tore the village apart. A fire had started on the far side of the village and was spreading fast. Philip was content with watching from the outside. He influenced the others as he left the way he came. He walked past 2 guards outside. both dead or unconscious, the one potentially from traumatic mental pain, the other probably from blood loss or asphyxiation. The fire burned beautifully against the dark night and reflected brilliantly off the white snow. Ashes rained lazily down, resting on the snow and tainting its perfect white with its faulty black. Screams bred new screams, reaching an even greater and greater symphony of pain and terror. Eventually, the fire started to dwindle, as did the screams. Where once a village stood, now a withered plot of burned dirt. It seemed appropriate. Where once people tried so hard to pretend to be people they were not, now stood nothing, or rather, something that wasn't pretend, something that was true. Nothingness. For all that people pretended to feel and to be, to themselves and to others, those feelings and emotions are fleeting, for no feeling is more permanent than nothingness. We survived. You may rest for now and lower your torch. The darkness will return, and when it does, I may call on you again. Please give our survival a like and share the tale with your companions. And as always, stay creepy.